actually have an observation, and I could be wrong because obviously the information I have is limited, and I'd like your thoughts around this. How come we're seeing the largest degree of disruptive behavior around these elections in the southeast and, you know, one state in the south-south? Is that a coincidence? Is there a reason for that? Because, you know, we've heard of trouble in Imo State. Okay. We've now heard about Enugu. Delta elections have been, you know, as far as I understand it, postponed. Then we've got the case of River State. I haven't heard any other region of Nigeria with sort of this same degree of intensity of problems like the southeast. So what is going on there?
I think it's just the level of desperation. That's what I will attribute it to. You know, and people just being unnecessarily patient. It's possible also they've been, yeah, or it's also possible that maybe somebody, a political juggernaut somewhere, has sponsored people, just like Olumide said, to go and disrupt the counting of votes where he thinks his opponent is going to defeat him.
I'm asking because yesterday, for example, we were lucky we had someone from River State who was able to give us a historical account of the way things had sort of traditionally panned out in River State, and which sort of explained why Rivers potentially was always going to be a difficult place for elections to take place.
For Rivers, it's to be expected. I mean, we know the antecedents. I mean, if there was ever going to be any flashpoint in these elections, definitely Rivers, followed by maybe one or two others, even in the southwest. But is there any particular reason for the southeast? I'm not so sure. Imo State, definitely, because we know that a state that typically would belong to one party seems to be going in the other direction, or may go in the other direction substantially. So definitely there will be contestations there, seriously. But you know, I don't know if there are any geopolitical reasons why.
Because we've also seen trouble in Edo, apparently. At least that's the reports that Adams, the governor of the state, you know, some of the allegations he made.
Well, talking about the geopolitical thing, there is another tweet here. I think it was an earlier tweet anyway, but it comes from Alan, and well, he did not state specifically where he was to make this observation, but then the question he was raising here is that why are there no failed card readers in the north, and why are most card readers in the south not working? Well, of course, I mean, he said this in absolute terms, but then, of course, we can't take that to the bank. But then, I guess a lot of the
just
complaints...
Pure
coincidence.
I mean, just pure coincidence. It may be coincidence.
I mean, that's how I see
That's a slippery slope right there. I don't want to go down there.
Maybe. It may be coincidence. Okay, in other words, it may, in which case it may be a deliberate...
Well, I mean, I don't even want to contemplate that. Let's just leave that alone.
Well, we did have someone who speculated as to why that was yesterday. But of course, I'm not going to borrow his words. Okay, hell no, you're not hearing. Excuse my language.
Okay.
Not from my mouth.
What would the intent be anyway, in any case? Because they started working after a while for the ones that...
Well, of course, I mean, there were issues, you know, about a film covering the lens, and then some of the INEC officials not knowing how to manipulate the machines until... so there were so many issues, but then, of course, I mean, if we're talking about the north-south thing, well, like Mr. Akpata said, it's a slippery slope because he does not want to contemplate.
Conspiracy theories can become very difficult to calibrate after a while. So.
You know, to me personally, I mean, even if the person snatches something like that, he's not going to use it for, I mean, to a collation center. But there is something that really gets me surprised sometimes when I hear people saying, around this part of the country, people collected enough PVCs, or as you hear people assigning percentages. It depends, and it's relative. Because if you are talking about a state where you have probably 1.5 million voters, right? And out of these 1.5 million voters, probably 1.4 went, and collected their PVCs, and you gave them probably 90% or 95%. You can't compare that state with a state that has probably 7 million, right? And out of that 7 million, 5 point something million have collected. These are the things people don't really need to get clear. And there is also this misconception that because somebody is from a given part of the country, he is likely to vote somebody from his own part of the country or somebody of his religion. These things are not really like that. I want to believe that if you go to the president's village, some people will not vote for the president.
Yes,
if you
course.
go to the main opposition leader's village, some people will not vote for him. So sometimes I just keep wondering when people say because somebody is from a particular part of the country, he may not be given the PVC, and it's petty.
No, of course.
It's petty, but there are some also real issues, though. So, for example, I've seen people ask, how come people in a place like Borno,
yes,
who are sort of facing Boko Haram onslaught, were able to collect, more PVCs than, say, in another part of Nigeria? And it's really a very simple answer. They're all in one place. They're in a camp. And then, so when INEC goes, yes, the IDPs, the displaced people. So when INEC goes and opens an office in the camp, they're all within the distance of the camp, as opposed to people who are spread out over 13 local governments who have to travel at some point. These things were being kept at local governments. So, you can explain some of these issues with real things that are going on the ground. And of course, the question of numbers as well,
exactly,
as you just explained. So there are reasonable excuses or explanations, if you like, on why in one part of the country there might be more people, choosing to collect their PVCs as opposed to others. It might also be about the hunger for just the ability to vote. Because if you're someone for whom governance has now literally become a matter of life or death, and then you believe that your safety and your security is going to be determined by whoever takes up a position in government, you may be, more desperate to vote than the person who doesn't really see the relevance of governance in his life. I don't know if you understand what I'm saying. So all these things are kind of subjective. But
I do think, though, that don't wave off those questions with one hand. They are valid questions, or at least they remain valid until they can be rebutted with plausible explanations. I still think the jury is out on how Ogun State was at 48 at one point, and so Borno also was at 90-something, 90-something% PVC penetration. All sorts of theories come to mind, but I'd rather just...
I think Borno, the explanation is pretty straightforward. They were gathered, most of them, in this, because the bulk of Borno has ended up in Maiduguri, which is, the one city that at some point was the only stable place. And even then, Borno, if we remember, just before the elections were postponed, Boko Haram was almost at the gate of Maiduguri itself. So the majority of people who were displaced out of the 27 local governments in Borno ended up either in Maiduguri or in places like Abuja and Lagos. And so they were all congregated in this, smaller space. And I think logistically it is easier to distribute within that smaller space than it is to distribute across a state. So I think the one for Borno State made perfect sense to me.
Not proxy collection.
No, I don't think so. I think they were in camps, and because they were in camps and they were told they could vote from camps, I think they all trooped out.
I was just trying to stay
I think so.